It was a really hard year, but I haven't sold anything yet. I still own everything that I own. In fact, I still do more deals. Now, the money's tighter, but that's okay. But I also have a job. And it is one of those things that I think when people get themselves most pinched is when they quit their day job because they think they're going to be an investor. And you got to be real careful about doing that, because there's a lot of people that are pinched, that are feeling the burn of what's going on in real estate right now. And then there's a lot of us out there like, oh my gosh, what do I invest in next? Like, who do I trust? What's a good deal? What do I buy? Because it's hard. It's a hard world right now. And I feel bad for people out there because we all have it, but it's real estate. Just wait a little longer. It'll come back.
What's up, Colorado? Chris Lopez here, the host of the Denver Real Estate Investing Podcast. I have Mike Hills with Atlas Real Estate Company in the studio today. So I've known of Mike for years, and then just lots of our network crisscrossing over the years. Some close friends have crisscrossed, and then earlier this year, we got to share a couple stages at some iCore events. We're both on there speaking about just investing in the current marketplace. Had a great conversation. We've talked numerous times since then. And now I finally get Mike in the studio to come talk about his background and also what the heck is going on in real estate.
Yep. Well, Chris, hey, thanks for having me. Same. I've heard about you for a long time. And people have told me, hey, you got to go meet Chris. We got to meet, and here we are.
Yeah, just 5 years too late, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
But let's start with your story here, because I know you were the second employee at Atlas. Mm-hmm. And I know you guys are, I think, over 10 years old. Mm-hmm. But tell me who Mike is in your story, because I know you have a very successful business and very successful investing career now.
Yeah, so here's what I would say. So I house hacked. Actually, here's my joke. I invented house hacking, and Bigger Pockets stole it from me. And I'm teasing, but I house hacked in 2001. I bought a house 2.5 months after I graduated college, lived there for a year and a half, did it again, but this is before house hacking was actually called house hacking.
Yep.
It was just, people called me crazy. Like, what do you mean you're buying rentals? I was like, I don't know, I'm broke. So having some real estate, just let it grow. Because here's the deal. Everybody listening, everybody knows somebody that's owned their house for 40 years or 20 years or 15 years or 50 years. And look at the math. The math just makes sense. You know, I make the joke that landlord's been around since feudal Europe. Why? Because he who owned the land is the Lord. So if that's the case, I am not bright enough to invent the next widget, but what I can do is own real estate and own it for the long haul, and it works out pretty well.
How did you get bit by the real estate bug? Like, what made you want to buy that first house hack?
Great question. So my best friend growing up, he lived across the street from me, and we've been buddies for 40 years now. His father was what's known as an accidental landlord. Kind of on purpose, but somebody would pass away and he'd buy out, a brother and sister.
Yep. And
then he would inherit it as a rental property. And I watched him when I was a young man up through college, and I had the good fortune to go to the University of Denver. And probably my sophomore, junior year at DU, my friend Mark, his father Bob, had acquired 7 or 8 rental properties, maybe 10 over the years, and then started selling them off piece by piece, one by one. And for those of you that live in Denver, I grew up in Sacramento. Think of how evergreen is to Denver. There's a town in the foothills of the Sierras called Auburn, as it is to Sacramento. And Bob sold these rentals off, bought land, built his own house, just basically GC'd it himself. And when it was all said and done, he owned his house outright and had maybe $500,000 in cash in the bank. And I watched this as in my formative years, my late teens, early 20s, and I thought, wow, if he did this by accident, imagine what I could do by doing this on purpose and putting some real time behind it, talking 20, 30, 40 years. It's like, so I'm going to do it. So I did.
That's awesome. All right, so you got a few house hacks.
Mm-hmm.
When did things become serious in terms of investing and then the whole Atlas thing?
Awesome. So funny story. So, you meet with your high school counselor, and your high school counselor says, do what you love. And I like to drink and gamble. So when my first job out of college, I was a national recruit for E&J Gallo Winery, and I worked there for maybe a year and a half. Started working for Paychex Payroll, so I sold payroll. Well, in that process, I actually opened my first liquor store. So when I said, I like to drink and gamble, so fast forward to 2008, I'm working for myself. My business partner and I at the time have 2 liquor stores, one in his name, one in my name because of the laws in Colorado. And we owned land and a building in Black Hawk, and we were literally building a casino. So got into development, and there's And then we got pinched by development. Why? Because the world crashed in 2008. And there's a lot of developers right now that are feeling the interest rate pinch of what's going on the last couple of years. Same, but different. So long story short, the casino project essentially cost me both of the liquor stores and my best friend, which sucks.
Ouch.
Yeah, I mean, and we can still be buddies. We're not as close friends. I don't know his kids. He doesn't know my kids, but we're not enemies or anything like that. He's doing very well. I'm doing well. It's just one of those things that it was too bad. We were young and dumb, and we were swinging for the fences, and mistakes were made, and friendships were lost. It happens. Now, the founder of Atlas is one of my dear friends. We went to undergrad together. So the three of us, were the three amigos. We all were running at DU together and causing trouble and having a lot of fun. And he had founded Atlas, and he came to me when I just needed a job. And he said, "Hey, man, why don't you come to work for Atlas?" And honestly, I looked at him, and he looked at me, and I was like, "Dude, you're kind of a pain, and I know I'm a pain, and I just lost a best friend. Can we do this again?" So we put some guardrails around it. We started doing it, and I joined Atlas in the beginning of 2013. So I've been there a little over 12 years. I think we're up to a little over 200 employees these days, operational in 10 states. So we're a regional real estate company. We call it the Rodeo region, expanding into the southeast. So it's one of those things that we're not just Denver. I mean, and today I own real estate in a couple different states, and 3 different states to be exact. And it's just one of those things, it works. Now, what was interesting about my journey to Atlas is when the casino project was going bad, I owned 5 houses. I owned the house that I lived in plus 4 rental properties. And I didn't declare bankruptcy or anything like that. I was able to shield my personal life and my personal holdings from business holdings, which wasn't a lot of fun, but it just is what it is. So I always had this love of real estate. But during the casino and liquor store years, I wasn't focused on real estate. Now, what was interesting, on the liquor store, we owned the land under one of them. The casino, we owned the land. So we always knew that real estate was the right way to go, just owning it for the long term. We just did it on the commercial side, not the residential side. So when I joined Atlas, I was like, wow, okay. And I joined as a property manager, and I've done a bunch of different jobs over the last 12 years that I've been there. But it is one of those things, it was just rental real estate. I was like, wow, this makes sense. So back to my original plan from more than 10 years previous, just buy residential properties, let them grow, let them do their thing, and you'll be happy that you did. And today, my wife and I own a little over 50 units in various, from anywhere from single-family homes. I think the biggest one that we own is a 12-plex. And it's one of those things that I've done all sorts of 1031 exchanges and buy this and sell that and move it from this state to that state, this size of property to that size of property. And it just comes back to own for the long term. And it speaks to what the Atlas investment thesis is, which the first pillar is own for the 20-year picture. If you're going to buy real estate, own it as though you're never going to sell it. Now, will you sell or refinance or, whatever? Yes. But own it as though you're never going to sell it. And if you go do it with that in mind, the end will take care of itself. So that's what we did.
That is great advice. So what 3 states do you own properties in?
So I own in Colorado, I own in Arizona, and then I have a single-family home in Northern California. I grew up in Northern California, so I still have a house there.
Okay, but so most of your stuff is in Arizona and Colorado?
Arizona and Colorado. Okay. Yeah, so, it's funny. I don't own anything in Denver proper anymore. We all know the rules have gotten tough in Denver. So I own Aurora, I own Littleton, I own Colorado Springs, I own in Phoenix, and I think those are the 3 big cities where most of my stuff is.
And then Atlas, Atlas is in how many states and how many doors you guys manage?
So we manage a little over 6,000 doors. What's important about that is of the 6,000 doors, about half are single-family homes, half are multifamily. So single-family versus multifamily, anywhere from duplexes all the way up to 100, 125, 130 unit apartment building. We don't do a ton of that, but our core competency is single-family homes. And of those 3,000 roughly single-family homes that we manage, we actually own just under 1,700 of them with a capital partner out of Northern California. And that was essentially the second fund that we ever did. Now, I say it's a fund, but it was really just a joint venture because it was them and it was us and what's known as a general partner, limited partner, or GPLP, where we own that in conjunction with them. And it's our job as the general partner to manage the properties. And that fund or that joint venture owns real estate in, I think it's 8 cities. I'd have to count, but we are in, like I said, rodeo region. So Idaho, Utah, Nevada, Arizona, Colorado, both sides of Kansas City. So Missouri, Kansas, Texas, Georgia, and then we're licensed but not operational yet in North Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, and Florida.
Oh, wow.
So those are on the roadmap coming soon.
You guys are aggressively expanding over there.
Yes.
Huh?
So.
All right, so back to this fund. So they were, I'm assuming, an institution or private equity group. They're
Yes.
all the capital, and then you guys are acquisitions, property management, running everything, and they're just the capital partner?
Well, sort of. They're the majority capital partner, but we had to do what's known as a GP co-invest. So they wanted our money in alongside theirs.
Yep.
Now, their number of investment has 9 digits in it. Ours had 8 digits in it, but it was still, it was a considerable amount of money, and I got to invest on the executive team at Atlas because I sit on the executive team, and I also got to invest as a private investor inside that fund, and it's been really fun. I mean, and granted, we launched this fund in 2021, and then the world collapsed in 2022. That we're all aware of what happened with interest rates in June of 22, but you know what? It's okay. It's okay because we're not going to sell. We don't need to sell. And we get offers occasionally to buy tranches of houses. I think the biggest one we got recently was somebody offered to buy 600 houses of the, call it 1,700, a little less than that. We're like, no, we'll just wait longer. And it's a unique position to be in because there's a lot of people that are pinched, that are feeling the burn of what's going on in real estate right now. And then there's a lot of us out there like, oh my gosh, what do I invest in next? Like, who do I trust? What's a good deal?
Yep.
And what do I buy? Because it's hard. It's a hard world right now. And I feel bad for people out there because we all have it, but it's real estate. Just wait a little longer. It'll come back.
Yeah. All right. So before we move on to talking about the market here, our typical listener on the podcast here is, a landlord, usually anywhere from a couple properties to, 15 or 20 properties. Mm-hmm. A lot here in Colorado, and a lot of people have some out-of-state stuff as well. All different varies of experience and on their investor journey. You've been through a lot as an investor, and also I really value people's opinion like yourself because you get to see the big numbers from all the properties you manage and acquire at Atlas as well. So you have a really cool perspective on there. What general advice would you give investors out there when it comes to real estate investing? You've already talked about 20-year mindset or 20-year time frame. Mm-hmm. What other tips would you say are critical for successful investing?
So something I speak to Denverites or people in Colorado. So if I say the word, Chris, to you, Colfax, what images does it conjure?
We're talking east or west?
East.
Usually a place I want to invest.
Okay. So it's a Kid Rock song. Hookers and drugs. That's what we think about. But what did they build at 225 in Colfax?
The hospital.
Hospitals. They spent $4 billion building hospitals. So we've been big into buying real estate over there from 2012 through 2017, maybe 2018. Why? Because of what's known as urban infill.
Yep.
And urban infill is just simply when cities mutate and change and move. And if you can pick the next stuff, think of Rhino or the Highlands. How many people made so much money because they picked the spot where the city was growing into,
yep,
known as urban infill. Starbucks is famous. They're amazing at this. Go find a Starbucks that's kind of on the edge of the ghetto. Why would Starbucks build there? Because they know how cities grow. They're really, really good at that. So it's sort of like the Starbucks rule. Follow them. They're really good at it. So that would be the second one. I would say urban infill is one of the pillars. And then the big one, I would say, stop trying to hit home runs. So many investors are out there trying to hit home runs all the time. And they're like, man, this is going to make me rich. I want to 4X my money, which is great if it can be done, but it's really hard to do.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that you got to make smart investments and play the long game. A get rich quick, we live in a microwave society where everybody wants instant gratification, and it can work, but it generally doesn't. Everybody out there is trying to be the next millionaire. And you know what? Real estate is an easy way to put 2 commas in your name, but it's not going to happen overnight. It takes a lot of time. I'll go back to my story. First house I bought September 1st, 2001. I graduated from DU June 9th, 2001, and I bought my first house September 1st, 2001. What happened 10 days later?
9/11.
9/11. So my investment technically went from a decent investment to nothing. The funny part is I bought that little condo for $145,000. Little townhouse right before Denver becomes Aurora, right before Evans becomes Iliff, on the border of Denver and Aurora. If you know restaurants where the Stampede is, because I used to go there when I was in college and single, because I think it was ladies' night on Wednesday nights or something like that. I can't remember the details, but so I knew the area. So I bought this house September 1st, 2001, and 10 days later was September 11th. When I did a refinance in 2010, they valued that condo at $99,000. I think I owed $125,000. I didn't refinance that one. I refinanced something else, but they did a appraisal of all my properties. And so I was like $25,000 or $30,000 underwater.
So this is 10 years later.
It's 10 years later. It's 2010. And I was $45,000 or technically $46,000 underwater from what I paid for it. So you know what I did? Nothing. I just waited longer. When I sold that property in 2020, I believe, I sold it for $340,000, $338,000, something like that. Now I only owed the bank at that time. I owed the bank $40,000, and I was able to 1031 exchange, call it $250,000, not quite that, but call it $200,000, whatever it was, into a 9-plex in Colorado Springs that I've owned for the last 5 years. So it's one of those things that when people are looking at their portfolios, one of the ways that investors, especially young investors, and I don't mean age, but in terms of experience, the way we drive ourselves crazy is looking at our values every day. Like, don't look at your stock values every day. Don't look at your real estate values every day. If you want to drive yourself crazy, do that. Like, make good decisions today and let it grow into the future. Don't be ignorant of it. Don't put your head in the sand, but don't also drive yourself crazy. Like, how much money do my stocks make today? Like, it doesn't work that way.
So with the, I love holding on for a long term. You had almost 20 years in that first condo you bought. So what advice would you give? Because that sounds good on paper, but you have to not run out of cash in between,
Correct.
right? You made $250,000.
Yep.
You went through some bad times and you were underwater on paper. What's your general advice for like cash reserves and things like that so you can run out the tough times to make sure you can profit the good times?
So I would say for the young investor, you want to make sure you have, 6 months of, it's the old financial planning rule, have 6 months of whatever your set bills are, your living expenses, including the other people's mortgage in the bank. So if I'm going to make this up, but if your living expenses are, I don't know, call it $5,000, then have 6 times that. So $30,000. But if
for me as a person,
for you as a person,
now my rental's on top of that.
So if you have a mortgage that's $2,000 a month and have an idea of what we use an expense ratio generally, depending on the asset, anywhere from like 27 to 33%. So call it 30%.
Yep.
So then I would say take 6 months of mortgage payments plus 6 months of 30% expense ratios for just the stuff that happens in rentals. And now you're sitting on, I don't know, $45,000 or $50,000 or $60,000. Now what's interesting is I used to do this religiously, but then I got to the point where my income was different and I had money coming in and the rental properties, and then you hit a certain scale that generally speaking you're going to be okay if you have a bad month or two. Now I will tell you, 2024 was a very, very hard year for my rental properties. It just was. We all know this. Vacancies up, evictions are up, cost of turns and cost of materials have gone through the roof. Contractors are more expensive. It's one of those, it was a really, really hard year, but I haven't sold anything yet. I still own everything that I own. In fact, I still do more deals. Now, the money's tighter, but that's okay. But I also have a job, so I'm a W-2 employee at Atlas, and it is one of those things that I think when people get themselves most pinched is when they quit their day job because they think they're going to be an investor. And you got to be real, real careful about doing that, because if you don't have the income, if you don't have the cash flow, it's really hard to make your bills. So I have the cash flow twofold, one from just the work that I do, but also from the properties. So it's a hedge against the market.
I agree. That's a mistake I've seen a lot of people do where, hey, they quit their job too soon, which more often than not, creates a very bad situation for the person.
Correct.
All right, so moving on to the market today.
Yep.
So you had mentioned 2024 was a tough year. I had the same thing with my rental properties as well. Now, I don't have the portfolio you guys do, but 2025 so far seems to be better, or I should say easier, or not as worse as 2024 in terms of like less vacancy, less evictions, more stable expenses. Is that what you're seeing in your personal and the Atlas portfolio? Like, is 2025 the same, better, or worse than 2024?
So a couple things. I would say if you just talk about housing stock, 2025 is worse. So I haven't looked in the stats, but I think it was April was the least amount of transactions nationally than any month since 2009. So it was the lowest amount of transactions in 16 years. So the realtors out there that are listening right now are all nodding their heads. They're like, yeah, it's really hard right now. And it is, because we also have a full-scale brokerage, both on the investment side and the retail side. So I feel it, and I can see it in the eyes of our agents. It's just hard right now. On the rental side, life has gotten a little bit easier because it's almost like this is the new normal. And interest rates, anybody that hopes interest rates are ever going to return to 3% or 3.5%, maybe they do. I'm going to go ahead and bet that in my lifetime, probably not. Now, I don't know that. If I had a crystal ball, you and I would be in Vegas right now having a lot of fun. But, I'm not, I have no idea what interest rates are going to do, but I think this is the new normal. And frankly, I would tell people that complain about interest rates that 6 or 7% is probably pretty healthy. I wish it was 3%, but I don't think it's going to be anytime soon. That was, I think it held down it was a false sense of security in what the market was doing. But specifically to your question, rents are back up, vacancy is down. I think we've learned how to manage just as an economy. Inflation is largely down. You know what the other thing that's happening? I get a sense of how the market's doing when contractors start reaching out back to me saying, hey man, do you have work?
Yeah.
Hey man, do you have work? Hey man, do you have work? All of a sudden, now they can't just jam me like, oh, you want a water heater? $4,000. Like, what? You can buy it for $1,000. Like, come on, install it for $600. They now, it's when these guys are reaching back out to me, it's like, oh, the world's turning back in our favor a little bit. So it's again anecdotal, but it is interesting to see.
When did you see the contractor shift?
Towards the end of 24.
Okay.
So and I don't think it was related to the election. It could have been, but it was just work. All of a sudden, contractors were like, hey, I need work, and their prices are starting to come back down.
Well, it's also when you look at especially the apartment building permits and a lot of the other projects. That's when all these projects, like the pipeline, is getting close to a cliff.
Correct. So now the new build, to your point, and this, we're going to talk about this, but this is I read a report, and I think it was Zillow just came out and said there's a little less than 5 million houses. We have
5 million house deficit,
shorting,
right?
Yes. Yeah. There's like 4.7 or 4.8 million house deficit right now.
Yep.
Which is going to drive pricing back up. Now, I don't know when that's going to happen, but it is, which speaks to what we talked about earlier, is just wait a little longer. It's going to be okay. It might be painful for a few years. I mean, so you just don't go on vacation. Don't go buy that new car. I think that's the other thing that I watch investors, the mistakes that they make. Keep your expenses in your personal life down until you're playing with your excess cash flow, not the cash flow that you need.
I made that mistake in my 20s. This was before real estate. I'm sure a lot of people have. I had lifestyle inflation, had a great business. All of a sudden I was making, a healthy 6 figures, sometimes a couple 6 figures a year as a, mid 20s. And then, man, expenses crept up, and then made the money, spent most of the money, and then income went away. I was like, oh, shoot.
Yes.
And so I learned that lesson in my 20s, fortunately, when I was young with hardly any obligations, but that is a mistake I see a lot of people make. I think another thing, too, I'm curious on here, I feel like a lot of people got, and this is I think in general, got very, lazy is not the right word, but just very comfortable since we had COVID, we had an influx, a lot of money come in there. I feel like the economy as a whole, everyone kind of got used to making more money and spending more money than they had. And I feel like we're also having some, austerity measures just from all that money being taken out of the market now.
I think so too. And I think, when things are going well, we all think, oh, it's never going to end. And then the music stops. And essentially the music stopped. It's the athlete that's trying to hang on for 1 or 2 more years. And you realize that, man, it's over. Nobody wants me anymore. I can't perform. And I think we can all feel that way from time to time. And it's a good lesson. It's a really good lesson. My wife and I have 4 kids, and there's been some things, and my oldest is 14. So we say, yeah, we can't afford that. And my 14-year-old, this is, I don't know, probably 4, 5, 6 months ago, she came to me and she's like, are we okay? I was like, okay, so let's talk about what I do for work. And I have a job, which does well, but we have a business on the side that is struggling right now. It's going to be okay. But what that means is when the business is struggling, you have to pull back. You have to weather the storm and be ready for it. So I like martial arts. I've been doing martial arts for, a little over 10 years now, and I'm on my third different one. And someday I'm going to write a book why business is like fighting, or why real estate is like fighting. Because, people are getting punched in the mouth right now. And the question is, can you keep getting back up? That's the mark of a good fighter. Having offense is great, but how's your defense and how tough are you? Because you're going to get hit in the mouth. And I think that's the thing. How about this? Best advice I got. It's probably 25, 26 years old. This is before the casino went bad. So I'm maybe 27. So I have a casino project I'm working on, 2 liquor stores and 3 or 4 rentals. And I took what I would call a mentor out, and I said, hey, what's my biggest problem? And he said, you haven't failed yet. And I was like, well, I'm not going to fail. And he was like, oh, make no mistake, you will. And you haven't failed yet. And you learn who you are. You learn who your business partners are.
Yeah.
You learn who your real friends are. And you learn who your spouse is if you're married. I wasn't married at the time. But that's when you learn. And that advice, I think about that, it's not quite 20 years later, but 20 years later, and it was great advice. Because, getting hit in the mouth and failing, and then having to come to people and be like, wow, I failed. Especially when young people tie their identities to the success they have.
Yeah.
Ooh, it's hard. It's a hard lesson to look in the mirror and be like, wow, I screwed that up. So, but it's a lesson that it's good to learn.
So, random question here. You talked about talking to your 14-year-old. Mm-hmm. And I've got soon to be 8, soon to be 6, and almost 1.5-year-old. Any good tips on teaching them about money? Because I've been trying to I'm just trying to figure out the best ways to, hey, we're in a good situation, right? Hey, we live a very comfortable lifestyle. At the same time, I have a very strong work ethic. My wife has a very strong work ethic, and I value and respect work ethic a lot. Mm-hmm. And my kids have a lot more than I had as a kid, which is cool. But I also see a lot of kids who are 15, 20 years older, and they're losers essentially, just in terms of like they don't have the work ethic, they don't work well, they don't respect money, they blow money. And I'm very I want to make sure my kids are smart and hopefully somewhat replicate me, because I think I have a successful life. And I give me tips on that, because I'm really just trying to figure out what to do.
I think it's really hard, and I think being very open. Now, my kids do not know how much what my net worth is, and I'm not sharing that with them. That's just not not doing that. But I will say, we made some good money. And now we don't have any right now. Now you have to be careful, because then they hear, oh my gosh, we're going to lose our house. And it's like, I'm being probably too flowery with my language to them. But it is one of those things that one of the things that we do is just try to just be open and honest. Hey, that's expensive. Hey, why don't you get a job? So my 14-year-old, she babysits. She's worked 3 different jobs for people that I know that have businesses that she can go work in their businesses. So we teach her, and then we say no. I think that's the big one, is the word no. Like, can I have this? No, but I need you to understand. So the way I say this, Chris, because I resemble the remark you just made about my kids are growing up with way more than I did. When I was growing up, my dad said we can't afford it. He actually meant we can't afford it. Mm-hmm. I don't say that to my kids, because there's virtually nothing that they ask for. They're not asking for Ferraris. They're asking for ice cream, or let's go to sushi tonight, or whatever. They're not asking for everything they ask for. Generally speaking, I can afford. But hearing them say no, we're not going to afford that. Why not? Because the world's hard right now. We don't need to. Yeah. So saying no, not giving them everything that they want, I think is, and then making them get jobs. Like, hey, you work in my house, you have jobs. Well, you're going to pay me? No, I'm not paying you to do the trash. This is called chores. Like I'm not going to pay you to do this. Now there will be, as my kids get older, I will have them work on the businesses, in the businesses. I also think for my kids, the plan is people that are close to me, that are not related to me, that are successful people that I value their opinion. I've set up for them to be mentors to my children.
Oh, that's cool.
Because it's a voice that's not mine. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really important. Like somebody else that you can ask questions about, money, or frankly sex, or any of the other things that kids in today's world, because dude, kids deal with stuff today that we didn't deal with.
Yeah.
Like Instagram and cell phones and email, and holy moly, is it hard to be. It's always been hard to be a kid. It's just different hard in today's world.
Yeah.
So
I appreciate it. Thank you. All right. So real estate, where is the opportunity in today's market? So I know we've talked a lot about this on the panel at iCore. We've had a few text and phone conversations since then. But generally speaking, where do you see the opportunity in real estate, like at a Denver level and also like a macro national level?
So we are raising our first fund as Atlas, and this is something that I'm in charge with. So everybody listening, call me. So that was my shameless plug. We are raising our first fund, and what we are buying is really threefold. So the first one, the fun one, is what's known as distressed real estate. So think of the regional and local builders who are building real estate right now that are just trying to give it away. It's these new builds that have come out of the ground, especially in a place like Denver, where if your new build hit the market in end of 23 or 2024, or God forbid 2025, that means you've been working on it likely for 4, 5, 6 years, which means your underwriting from 2019, 2020, and 2021, your numbers are awful because the world's hard, interest rates have more than doubled, so you're just not simply making any money. There's builders going out of business right now in our local market. It wouldn't take a long Google search to find a couple of them. So what we're doing is seeing opportunity in what's called buying distressed builder inventory at a 15 to 25% discount to retail. So in English, what that means is if it's a $500,000 house and you buy it at $400,000, that's a 20% discount to retail. Retail being whatever the market says it's worth. Well, builders can't sell right now. Mm-hmm. So where we're finding opportunity is going in and buying the entire row of townhouses or the entire neighborhood, whether that's 6, 12, 59. We've got a deal we're working on in Tucson that's 89 units, all single family homes, where we're trying to buy the entire development. Now this is a national builder, so not a regional builder, but even the national builders, man, they got to get this debt and this stuff off of their books. So what we're doing is opening to people like you, Chris, and anybody listening and saying, hey, join us and we'll invest alongside you, because these are big deals. And the idea being that we're buying tranches of homes at a discount to retail, owning them for 3 to 5, 6, 7 years, 2 years, whatever it takes for the market. And then when the market rebounds, turning around and selling them. And the beauty is, and think of it this way, if you buy a house at a 20% discount to retail, you don't need the market to go up 10%. You just need the market to get back to what it was, and you've made your 20%. It's actually a fascinating deal out there, and we're seeing a lot of opportunity like that.
Yeah, I've had one friend and some other people do the play. I like it a lot. I mean, I've been harping for 18 months on our podcast. Go out there and go talk to an individual, or as an individual, go talk to a builder, and you can get a property at 10, 20% off.
Yep.
I mentioned we had our monthly market update podcast last month. I was telling you this earlier, Mike. I had a client who sold a rental in California, lots of equity, and they got 3 or 4 townhomes out here in Denver at 20% discount to what they're selling to retail owner occupants, plus some nice builder incentives with some upgrades in there, some other things like that as well.
Yep.
Like amazing opportunities out there right now. Yep. And I agree. I don't think it's going to be a crash. I think the market's just illiquid right now. And I think a lot of us, myself included, are saying, hey, 25, the market will come back. Obviously, I and a lot of us were wrong. 26 or 27 probably will come back. And it'll probably come back and then add a few points on there as well.
Yep. Well, and here's the deal. And this goes back to, we're not trying to hit home runs, just base hits. And, for those of you like baseball analogies, like home runs are sexy, but that's not how you win the game. Generally, the team with the most hits scores the most runs, therefore they win the game. And baseball is one of those things, it's a long game. Real estate investing is a long game. So it's one of those things, if you're trying to make $1 million overnight, really hard to do. But if you're trying to make $1 million, you can do it. It's just takes time. So to your friend from California, the example you just talked about, we're doing the exact same thing. We're just doing it bigger scale.
Yeah.
So, and here's the deal. What we've gotten good at over the years, and we have some very long and deep standing relationships in the private equity world with some of the biggest players in the single family for rent space. How about this? Let me say it this way. Remember when Zillow was buying houses? They, they're on record of losing a lot of money because they could have done a better job.
Oh, yeah.
Well, everything they bought in Colorado was under my license. We bought and sold every single house as their broker. It was their money. They decided it, but they needed somebody to do the paperwork. So we did the paperwork for them. So we have some of these very, very large individual relationships. But what we're doing now is saying, hey, we've been doing this for a long time and done very well. So opening it up to you and everybody else saying, join us with what we're doing, because it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
And it's, man, going out and buying entire communities. So here's the joke I made. I told you that I got to invest individually in our joint venture with the capital partner out of California.
Yeah.
Well, great. I put on $100,000, but that fund owns, just under 1,700 homes. So I own like 1,700 doorknobs. That's what my $100,000 bought me.
It's good diversification.
It is great. And that's what we're doing right now is to all of us saying there is opportunity. And I would do both. If somebody's like, well, I've got $500,000, it's like, cool. Go buy 1 or 2 properties yourself and diversify a little bit and put it alongside somebody or with somebody that can help you make some money too.
I agree. If you don't put all your eggs in one basket, we all know that saying.
Correct.
And I've seen a lot of people make that mistake when it comes to syndications.
Yep.
Too much money into like one sponsor or too much money into like one asset class.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, when you're buying a rental property, obviously like that it's different economics. You have to put down usually a healthy down payment. But if you're doing syndication or fund, I'm a big fan of smaller checks across multiple deals.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like the way you buy stocks, right? I can buy a lot of stocks with a small amount of money.
Yep.
So I've seen people, they put too much money into one project or into like one sponsor. So what opportunities or tips do you have out there from like the property management side? Because I know this is a lot of our listeners are self-managers out there.
Yep.
And it is it's tough. It is tough, especially the last 3 years now with a lot of the laws Colorado has passed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what tips do you have for people who are managing properties out there now?
I would say the number one is we are in a renter retention mode.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say, example, you have somebody that you want to raise their rent $150 or $200, but they've been with you for 4 years and they're fairly consistent. It's just a math equation. If you move somebody out that's been in the house 2 to 4 or 5 years, first of all, do yearly inspections, annual inspections, so you know what the property looks like. Because if you haven't been in a property, I've made this mistake before. I haven't been in a property in 10 years because there was the first little townhouse I bought, first place I ever bought. I had this same tenant in there for 12 years. By the time when I moved them out in 2020 to sell the property, they had been there since 2008. And I walked in there, I was like, this is disgusting.
So full remodel, right?
Full remodel. Huge mistake. But it was okay because I was going to sell the property and I had the money, so fine. But I should have known that beforehand, right? Now, so if a tenant, back to the example. So if you have somebody a resident that has been there 2 to 4 or 5 years and you know what it looks like, it's just a math equation. It's like, okay, if I move them out, August 1st is right around the corner. If I move them out August 1 or July 31st, and it's going to cost me $5,000 or $6,000 to turn the unit, plus at least a month of downtime and rent,
Yep.
maybe 2 months in rent. Now you're talking, if somebody moves out July 31st and you don't have it re-rented till August 1, you're probably looking at $10,000.
It kills your NOI for the year.
It kills your NOI maybe for the next 2 or 3 years. But if your resident's like, well, I just can't afford the rent raise, then keep them. See if you can get the rent up $50 or revisit in 6 months or something like that. Don't be penny wise and pound foolish. That's one of them.
It's a great tip.
I think the same thing is true when you're doing a turn. Like I'm putting that hardwood plank, water resistant.
The LVP?
Yep, LVP.
I love that stuff.
Yeah, well, because carpet. So there's 2 things with carpet. Number one, carpet you have to replace every so often, and after 5 years, you can't charge it back to the resident because it's a depreciating asset. So yes, it costs a little bit more to put the LVP in, but that's a kind of a good expense, especially on some of your more C class, C plus, B minus properties where the turns are a little more frequent. Maybe they're smaller units, but it saves on carpet cost. So little tips like that.
I have kids and dogs. I want LVP in my house. Like
Right.
I love this stuff. It's just it's durable and looks good.
Yes, I totally agree. Totally agree.
But back to real tips.
I would say that. I would say have there's three things that a different mentor of mine said years ago. Have a good attorney, have a good banker, and have a good liquor store. The fourth one on the property management, I would say add a good contractor.
Yeah.
Somebody that you trust that can contract. Now, I'll do another shameless plug for Atlas. One of the things that I like about hiring a property manager. So I don't manage any of my own properties. Atlas manages all of my properties for me. And I do that for liability.
Yep.
And here's why. If Atlas screws something up, if you look at least in Colorado, and generally all states are like this, it's negligence is what gets you sued for by far the most amount of money.
Yep.
I mean, it just absolutely does. Well, if I'm not managing the properties, if I have a third-party property manager doing it, and I know what their rules are, and I approve all their terms, and it's in writing, it's on text and email, where I'm not saying, no, don't change the furnace, or don't change the water heater, let it go another year, where I'm like, yep, do it, over and over and over again, it's going to be really hard to prove negligence on my part.
Yep.
Might be able to prove it on an employee of your management company, but man, having that protection, especially for someone like me that's getting to the point where I have very real assets and a wife and 4 kids to feed, and I can't mess around with this stuff. The other thing to that point, for those of you listening, if you don't have an umbrella policy, an insurance policy, have an umbrella policy.
That's a great tip.
I think mine's like $3 million and it's $300 a year or something crazy.
They're cheap.
They're super cheap because you're probably never going to use it, but God forbid you do. That's why we all have insurance. So I would say that's a real big one. Getting eyes on the property at least once a year, driving by it, just and knowing. Now, I kind of like the idea, everybody can get fired from their job. It would be a weird thing if I left Atlas, but I mean, I could go back and manage my own properties and replace a chunk of my income overnight if I no longer have to pay a property manager. So it goes back to that cash flow, having that back end cash flow, kind of an insurance policy, if you will, in my own pocket. I think that's good. Looking at the properties, having a good lender, I think is really, really important. Banker, lender, whatever you want to call it. And then somebody for advice, somebody that knows more than you, that you can go to them and say, hey, this is my situation. What do you do? I'll give you an example. One of the things that we do at Atlas is we will do what we call portfolio evaluations for any of our clients, and they're free. So I have a team, and I built a team years ago that will take, Chris, if you're like, here's my 8 properties, we'll ask you for all the information, we'll put it into our system, and we'll say, this is what we would recommend. Well, I have my team do that for me. Why? Because I get too involved. When some of the advice I give when somebody house hacks, I'll say, I'm like, you're never allowed to go back to the house. They're like, but I love this house. I had my children in this house. Like, it's not a home anymore.
It's an investment.
It's just a house. Like, you have to cut the emotional attachment to it. And I think we see this on the portfolio evaluations where people like us are like, oh no, but I love that house. It'll turn around. I'm like, it's a dog, and it's been a dog for 2 years. You just don't see it because you're too emotionally involved. Sell it and move on. It's like, oh, that's actually really good advice. So I think that answers the question.
Yeah, those are great tips. Mike, this has been a great podcast. Are there any other knowledge you want to drop or share with listeners? Because you shared a lot here today. Any other thoughts percolating in your mind there?
I would, so politics aside, believe in the American dream, the big one. Democracy, what we're doing, there's always threats to it, but I think our real estate market makes the most millionaires every year and will continue to do it because investing in real estate is the one thing we all have access to. That, look, man, I'm not smart enough to invent the next widget. What I can is try to make smart decisions today and just let time take care of itself. And you're all listening because we all know this. So if we know it, why don't we do it?
Great. Mike, thank you so much.
Chris,
great podcast. We'll have to do this more often now.
I love it, man. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. All right, everyone. We'll see you next week on next week's episode. Bye-bye.